Welcome back to this special episode of Curiosity Theory in collab with From First Principles. I am your co-host of Curiosity Theory, Dr. Dakotah Tyler, aka Dr. Starkid, physics professor, science communicator, and astrophysicist. And I am here with, to my left,
The white shot. Yeah.
White Shot.
My fault.
No, you're good.
Lester Nare, co-host of From First Principles.
Krishna Choudhury, also co-host of From First Principles.
And Justin Shaifer, also known as Mr. Fascinate, co-host of Curiosity Theory.
Let's get into it. So y'all did but undergrad at Princeton? Is where
Yes,
y'all met?
yeah.
What were your major? You were physics?
I was physics, yeah.
Physics?
I started as an econ major, and then I moved to Program 2, which was the new visual arts program at the school. At the time, the president was Shirley Tillman, and she really wanted the arts to. There was an art school already, but there was only art history as an undergrad, and there wasn't arts where you're either doing painting, sculpture, film. Didn't really have a degree you could get, and so Program 2 had started 1 or 2 years before I got there. So that's where I ended up, which explains the media, video creation, LA nexus.
Interesting. And so you said, Krishna, you convinced him to come out here.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was looking for places to be. And you were in North Carolina at the
I
time.
was in North Carolina at the time, which is where my family
Where,
was.
Charlotte?
Raleigh area, just
Raleigh,
outside of
okay.
Raleigh.
Yeah.
And when you at the time, if you graduate from Princeton, you go to New York for finance, you go to DC if you want to be in politics, you go to the Bay if you want to be in tech.
Yeah.
And those were the paths, right?
Yeah.
And LA was for the rejects.
Or like the creatives.
People who were crazy enough to have an idea would come to. So it's funny, the Princeton LA cohort, in our generation, are all trying to be musicians, trying to be writer directors, and it just was not as common for alums to come out here after school because our network from the university was in New York, DC, and San Francisco.
Yeah.
So I was looking at SF in LA, and Christian's like, bro, you're gonna love LA.
Yeah.
No, LA's cool.
Yeah, I love
I
LA.
rock with LA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes, y'all, LA, I feel like I also got a certain type of LA experience that probably wasn't ideal. Like Dakotah, obviously you had the UCLA PhD program. You have a similar kind of experience and probably community built around that.
Yeah, like my family's here and friends
Yeah,
here.
I think I'm equally nerdy and academic in my interests, but I came out here and, I was hosting science TV shows or producing educational things. And I got kind of lumped in with these entertainment people,
You don't think that you don't think that that's the field that
that's
you
not.
play in?
I don't think that those are my people. I think my people
got
are the
you.
nerds.
Yeah.
And I think that I was around a lot of that and their interests and even value systems. A lot of those people come to LA so that they can get some kind of fame specifically. What's the driving force behind the fame? Just so more people can look at me. And it's
I want more people to know me.
Yeah. And it's I want to educate people. And so I just felt like there was a clash there that felt that.
How's that going to make you famous?
I mean, I don't exactly. That's exactly their questions. And so I felt like, I've been in Tulsa, Oklahoma for 2 months now, building out our studio space, and there's an emerging entrepreneurial ecosystem there. That's also funded by a lot of the private money that's coming into the space.
Nice.
So it's been an interesting group of, I'd say, idea-driven and innovative people. I found it a little bit more stimulating and communal than LA. But I really would be curious about the academic LA experience. It sounds a little bit different and probably better for what I
You think that Tulsa is more communal than Los Angeles?
Absolutely.
Oh, maybe just not on the days when I'm there?
When you came there, we went to several events. The last couple times you've been there, we've gone to several things that were thrown by people in that community.
That's true. In LA, there's 1 million of those every single day.
But those aren't people that you're frequently fraternizing with because they live in different parts of the cities.
I understand what you're saying because when I first came out here, I was living in downtown, just around the corner, and I was working in influencer marketing. So my daily life was being surrounded by, at this point I was 25, and I was working for this influencer marketing company that would have these 18 to 22-year-olds with at least like minimum 1 million followers on
sound
Instagram
awesome
or whatever.
to be around.
And so like, and I was the creative director.
You should have seen his Instagram at the time, mate. It was gnarly. It was,
Wait, what do you mean?
I was like, who, what's going on?
You have to like imagine this is 2015, 16, 17, right?
Yeah.
And so at the time, this is Vine was still popping. People hadn't really figured out content monetization on a lot of platforms. And brands knew that this was the new wave, but they didn't know how to access this. So the idea would be like Coca-Cola wants to do brand placement with, you know, the MagCon crew or whatever, which was this like group of kids that were just like suburban kids that got huge on Vine and stuff like that. I think to your point though, that cohort, right? You know, they got famous on the internet. They all moved to LA from all these different places. They all kind of hung out together and didn't really socialize outside of like the people who were already famous. And they just, it was a different, having come from like the sort of Princeton community that we were in, the conversations are different. It's very individualistic. It's like transactional in terms of the relationships. And it can be hard to find your pocket in LA in a way that's maybe less hard in other locations. And so I was eventually able to find a pocket, but it took me having Krishna, who already had an established network, to find it. But organically on my own, I was in a similar entertainer space. So I can understand what your experience was like.
But y'all like LA.
Yeah, I mean, I like LA a lot.
I do too.
Yeah, it's dope. I would like to live here for the rest of my life, for sure.
You don't necessarily feel that way, right?
No, I don't feel like I need to live here forever.
Yeah.
But I like it here.
Yeah.
I'll move where it makes sense to move.
Well, yeah, I mean, as in you're in academia, right? So that
A little bit.
yeah, sort of, yeah. So academia is very nomadic in some sense.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you're doing the full tenure track type stuff. You go from one postdoc to another postdoc.
Yeah.
Finally, if you're lucky, you get a tenure track.
Yeah.
So yeah.
When did you decide that you didn't want to do that?
I decided like sort of towards the end of my PhD, I decided that I didn't really want to do that.
But you had thought up until that point, you had always thought that you like want to go on and be a tenured professor?
Yeah. I mean, look, I really enjoyed research and I really enjoyed teaching. And, you know, that's part of the reason why we actually started this podcast is because I enjoy teaching and just talking about science, breaking stuff down. But the monotony of academia and the relentlessness of uncertainty that comes with it, like, I don't know where I'm going to be. I don't know if I'm going to have a job in 3 years. You know, given like even the recent cuts to funding, it's like
Maybe illegal to be a teacher in a few years.
yeah, shit. You know, so
Be an outlaw.
yeah, and I wanted like a real financial stability while still doing scientific research at the cutting edge. And it turns out there's a lot of private sector opportunities that afford you that. You know, you just have to look and you have to sort of get lucky, which I did, and then you know. Once that became sort of stable, me and Lester decided, let's do this.
Yeah. Now, I'm glad that you said that because I think a lot of people that go into some STEM fields, maybe like physics specifically, but grad school, they have this idea that that this is only good for like academia.
100%.
But the skills that you learn as a scientist, I mean, these are skills that every single company wants.
100%.
Right? Doing data analysis, learning how to ask scientific questions, critical thinking, very, very applicable.
100%.
I mean, Wall Street is built on the backs of PhDs in mathematics and physics.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's more. I think there's more PhD physicists that go into Wall Street than they go into academia. Straight up.
Well, there's only something like 10. There's only enough jobs for something like 10% of physics PhDs to get a tenure track role.
Yeah, exactly. So there is a funnel, right? And so people go do other things, and it turns out the mathematics of a lot of different sectors is just a derivative of stuff that you've learned in your physics or mathematics courses, right?
Which is also sort of mind blowing that these like these kind of like fundamental physics principles apply to something as abstract as an economy that humans create.
Yep.
I think that's sort of that's like very peculiar.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most famous version of that is the Black-Scholes equation that's used in options trading, like to accurately price an option. That thing is literally the heat equation, just
What?
different. The variables mean different things, but it's like in the heat equation, you're trying to like understand some sort of like Brownian motion and how different like sort of influences can change the heat and the temperature and all these things of a material. And the Black-Scholes equation is just that.
It's like sort of controlled randomness.
Yeah. And so the guy who came up with the Black-Scholes equation was literally trying to do it through the lens of like borrowing from the heat equation and then creating this like option strategy, which now is worth what, trillions probably.
Yeah, it's with the more that you get into those associations, I think that it becomes more and more clear to me that this is all just obeying the laws of physics.
Yeah.
There's not like some uniquely special thing that's happening with us as humans, whether we think we're conscious or we have culture or whatever. It's like this is very much all explainable kind of by math.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. I mean, so when I was an undergrad, I started getting into, I was, trying to figure out what kind of physics I want to do, because physics is extremely broad. And I dabbled in a lot of different things. Like I did some cosmology research, and then I got that was my first thing. It wasn't really into it as much. And then I really got into biological physics, and the idea of like taking the laws of physics as, these rules that cannot be broken, but somehow biology hacks it or uses it in a way that looks like it's hacking for us, right? Like the one thing I say all the time is like the second law of thermodynamics says everything goes to soup, right? Entropy keeps increasing, so everything should go to equilibrium and we should all just be soup. But living beings are exactly not that. We're highly ordered systems, low entropy compared to the rest of the world, which is always going to soup. And it's kind of crazy that like, on its face, it looks like it's going against the second law of thermodynamics, but actually life is harnessing the second law of thermodynamics by saying, okay, in order to maintain a highly ordered system, you have to create more disorder on one end, right? That's why we eat and, release. That process is doing exactly that. It's taking energy in the form of low entropy, which is food, carbohydrates, things like that, and then it's releasing it in the form of CO2, action, heat, all of these other things. It's such a cool thing to think about. That like, the laws of physics are what they are, but the universe has figured out so many different ways to create structure.
Yeah. Also super interesting how nature is sort of infinitely better at engineering, at finding the pathways to get to that.
Yes.
And we're not.
Well, is it better or just better practiced?
Yeah, I mean, it's had 4 billion years, or however, I don't know, 3 billion years to get there, So at first it was probably pretty bad.
Yeah, well, for the first like 3 billion years, it was pretty much just single cell.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's a good point.
Brute force extrapolated over billions of years.
Yeah, and I think it's like kind of hard for us to visualize what 3 billion years is like.
Totally.
You know, it's a really long time.
Which also, I think, when you contrast that or compare that to the rate of like knowledge acquisition or technological progress that's like a result of scientific discovery, particularly, let's say, in the last 200 years, that rate of growth or that rate of improvement, and this, when you look at the scale of the universe and how long it took the universe to do similar levels of improvement, is like pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's actually pretty impressive.
You could say on a per capita basis, if you consider time, we are better engineers.
You may have flipped me on this issue.
That's so.
I mean, that's one of the central plot points of the three-body problem.
Right.
Oh,
right?
it's my favorite book,
is
man.
the fact that these aliens are so scared of us because within, like, 400 years ago was Newton. 100 years after that was Maxwell's equations and electromagnetism. Like, very soon after that, we started learning about like nitty-gritty math. Then we got into the atom, quantum mechanics, general relativity. Like immediately split the atom like 10 I think we split the atom like what 40 years after finding out the nucleus existed.
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
crazy.
Which is
That is pretty
crazy.
right? When it
That's
took us
wild.
when it took us from Euclid all the way to Newton was like 1400 years, 1500 years,
And when was the Wright brothers' first successful flight?
1904 or
Yeah,
1905.
yeah.
70 years later, 60 years later, we're on the moon. Come
Yeah,
on.
yeah, dude, exactly.
yeah,
It's
pretty crazy.
insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're
That's
beat-
wild.
Yeah, that is pretty
It's
crazy.
insane.
That is pretty
yeah,
wild.
like so. It is quite impressive.
You know, the other thing that the aliens were scared of us about in the three-body problem was our ability to hide things that we actually thought from
Oh,
each
yeah.
other.
Yes.
Yeah, so to lie or to just like withhold even. Like this idea that I guess this alien civilization, like anything that they thought was immediately, transmuted to everybody. It was like broadcasted.
Yeah.
So this idea of like a lack of transparency is terrifying. And I mean, I guess for a species that doesn't have that capability, that's like
Yeah, I mean,
you can
well,
never
what
trust
sort of? I think it's easy to think about the pressures that would lead to the ability to lie. We see that in animals.
Yeah.
There are like monkeys that will trick other monkeys so that they can like steal some food.
or Malarian mimicry we were talking about before, where it's like
well, this
organisms.
is like a very indirect way of lying.
yeah,
An animal that develops like traits that make it look like another animal that's toxic or something like that.
Yeah, like butterflies do that, right? Things like that. Yeah.
And I wonder like what sort of pressures would lead to an advanced like intelligence that didn't lie, that like never developed that ability.
I want to give a quick spoiler alert because this is spoiler alert. This is similar to the plot of the new Apple TV show Pluribus.
I keep hearing about it.
Same, I haven't watched it yet.
So it's still early, and it's Vince Gilligan, so he's going to take forever to like actually make the plot go forward. But so far there is this advanced alien intelligence that infects the human body. It's not like there's no like bodies of aliens. So it's like it has infected us via like, getting into our bloodstream and then it transmits via saliva or whatever. So now there's like 11 people on all of planet Earth that have something genetically that doesn't work. And so they remained normal, but everyone else is now hive mind humans and they don't have the ability to lie as one of the character traits. And so one of the main characters constantly asking like, what's going on? And she finally finds out early on that, they can't lie. And that's like this interesting evolutionary thing we were just talking about, which is like, what is the driving force behind getting to a place like that if you're this advanced alien species? It's a very interesting thought experiment.
Yeah. So you talk about this hive mind. And it's like if everybody's connected and has the same goals, then it makes sense for you to be open about everything because you only stand to benefit because you have the same goals as everybody else, whatever those may be.
Right.
Clearly, that's not what happened with us.
We got a different formula on this planet.
It's also interesting when you talk about, we had a neuroscientist on our show not long ago. She's a PhD candidate, and this was insane. We got on a call with her one day, and she was at the microscope doing brain surgery on a mouse and like talking to us on the side.
Oh yeah.
I don't even feel like she brought it up. We were like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
She's
I was
like,
like,
oh yeah, it's just like
what's
a little
going
brain
on?
surgery. Or
It
something
was just
that.
like another day. So impressive. Very impressed with that. Lindsay Ejo.
Yeah.
She's a great science communicator. And what she does in her research is she infects the brains of mice with this virus that they engineered that causes these specific brain cells, I don't know, some sort of neuron, to construct proteins that effectively act as a switch. And if you shine a light on it,
Channel
then it
rhodopsin.
what's it called?
It's called channel rhodopsin. Yeah.
And you can flip on or off these cells. And she's trying to understand, what the behavior is there. Can you moderate pain? Can you damp it down? Do the mice go crazy? Can they survive this? Whatever. And so it is really interesting to think about a species that engineers something like that. And literally the cells in your body, construct these proteins like just, I don't know, in the moment. And then you like lose control of yourself. It's a really interesting Really interesting thing. Think
Yeah, neuroscience.
We
is
did
insane.
do an episode on this.
So this was when we were trying to predict Nobel Prizes.
Right.
And
Yes.
I said channel rhodopsin is something that should get the Nobel Prize.
Yes.
With Carl Deiseroth at Stanford.
Which it did not.
It did not, but it's on its way.
It's on
dude.
its way.
It's
It's on the
way.
path.
That thing is definitely gonna. That thing is insane. I actually in my
Can
PhD
you talk more about that?
Yeah,
I don't
so-
know about that specific.
on that specific thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, channel rhodopsin is it's a channel protein, meaning it sits on the cell membrane. So the cell has an inside and outside, and the membrane is the thing. And the way that neurons work, effectively, they require they actually require electricity, okay, to talk to one another, okay. And the electricity is not electrons; they use ions, ions of potassium, sodium, calcium, chlorine, things like that. And the way that neurons work effectively is they've got an inside and an outside. There's I forget actually which is more on the inside or outside, but it's basically potassium and sodium. There's a bunch more sodium on one side, there's a bunch more potassium on the other side. And the way a neuron turns on and off is it opens up proteins on its membrane that let in ions. So it's very rapidly gonna discharge in some sense. It's like almost like a capacitor that's
Yeah,
charged,
it's
and then you
exactly like
connect
a
it.
capacitor.
Yeah, it's exactly like a capacitor that's charged. And when you introduce a short, in this case, you open the proteins, the charge immediately runs in one direction or the other. And this is what lets neurons have that really short time scale response, right? Because otherwise cells, if you just use diffusion of like molecules just like moving around, because like there's more sugar here and less sugar there, that's going to take a long time. But if you use electricity, where all of these ions are positively charged, they want to get the hell away from each other, then you have this really fast response, which is when you get an action potential and things like that. So channel rhodopsin is a very specific protein that is a channel protein that's attached to another like little protein that responds to light of a particular frequency. And when a photon hits that protein changes shape, which causes the channel to open or close effectively.
Yeah.
And then from there, you can now control, if you have a little fiber optic cable that goes down to this guy, you let in exactly that frequency of light, it'll open.
Literally a light switch.
It's literally a light switch. It's pretty insane that we can do that. It was a really cool bioengineering that has opened up a lot of different avenues. I did my PhD in biophysics as well, and I was in, you were at UCLA. I don't know if you know about Mayank Mehta's lab on the 5th floor of Knudsen.
I don't think so.
He was doing neurophysics research, and I was in his lab. And we actually also did brain surgery. So I've done brain surgeries of my own
On mice?
on rats.
On rats,
We do it on rats. But yeah, you get in there, and then we weren't doing channel rhodopsin stuff like that. We were actually doing electrophysiology, which is basically tiny little wires that go into the brain. We were studying specifically something called the hippocampus. And so you get wires that are like thinner than a hair, and you put it down there, and then you can actually hear the neurons.
For other people who may just be kind of not familiar with channel rhodopsin, that's how it's pronounced, what are the future implications of that kind of technology? Why do you think it's Nobel Prize worthy?
Well, the reason why I think it's Nobel Prize worthy is a lot of times when you have like techniques that are developed and then used by basically like at least one lab in every single university, that becomes something that is Nobel Prize worthy. For example, the CCD, which is the charge coupled device that's used in astrophysics to like get in the back of telescopes and like actually see shit. That won the Nobel Prize because it's just like the greatest detector that we have. It just uses the properties of silicon to like see where the light came from. It's super high fidelity, even with not a lot of light, you can get signal.
Kind of like converting photons into electrons and then into some digital digital information.
Exactly, yeah. So the CCD won the Nobel Prize.
Do our cell phones have CCDs or do they have something else?
I think they might have CMOS, which is like the next generation. Yeah. I don't know what CMOS stands for, but it's similar technologies like semiconductor.
Those are like the sensors, right?
Yeah.
CMOS sensors.
Yeah,
Those are in Sony cameras as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure what our iPhones use actually.
Yeah, I can look that up.
Yeah.
CMOS.
Very cool. Wait, so you were messing with the hippocampus?
Yeah.
What specifically were you looking at or looking to learn?
Yeah. So my PhD was twofold. One was mostly doing physics style modeling of the brain, and that one didn't have much to do with this experiment. This experiment specifically was looking at the CA1 cell layer of the hippocampus, which is a region of the hippocampus where cells do really cool things, because the hippocampus is kind of like the control center of our brain. Like the cortex, which is on the outside, that's the most recent development of the human brain.
Like the most human part.
Yeah. Not a lot of mammals have as big of a neocortex as we do. But the hippocampus, it's sometimes called the lizard brain because it's a super old structure.
So this is what we share with most reptiles.
Most reptiles, birds have a hippocampus, a version of it. And in the 1970s, there was this guy, John O'Keefe, also won the Nobel Prize very recently. He discovered these things called place cells, which are pretty incredible to think about. So, how do we know where we are? Okay, is the question. And it turns out in the hippocampus, there's these things called place cells that only fire when you're in a certain spot. So, for example, if at your house, you can turn the lights off and you can still navigate through the house because you have a memory of the spatial layout of your house, right? When the power cuts happen, we've had power cuts happen because people be stealing copper fiber or some shit.
Crazy.
Anyways, that's a whole other story. That's a whole other story. But whenever those power cuts happen and you need to find a candle, right? It's very dark, but you can still navigate through the house because you've got a mental map of your house. Okay, so now let's think about neurologically, how could we do that? Okay, in a computer, what you would do is basically have a storage system where you store the layout of your house, right? And then when you're in one spot, you try to plan a path, and that path is going to be okay, what's the neighboring point? Go to that neighboring point that's closer to my goal, right? The hippocampus does something that's eerily similar. There's place cells that let's say there's a place cell that's attached to your bedroom, okay? When you're in your bedroom, that place cell is firing, telling the rest of your brain you're in your bedroom. There's another place cell that only fires when you're in the hallway outside your bedroom, okay? And it's connected synaptically.
Are they configured spatially? Are they configured in some similar way, or does the configuration not matter?
In the brain?
Yeah.
No, it's actually, that's a good question. It's an active thing of research. The place cell for my bedroom could be here. The one for the hallway could be here. Then the kitchen could be here. In terms of actually, if I were to image the hippocampus on where these cells are. So it matters more the connection rather than the spatial arrangement of these guys. Gotcha. But effectively what's happening is you've got one cell that tells you where you are, and then when you plan out where you want to go, the hippocampus can sort of do a simulation of where you want to go, and you can actually see that, and you can be okay, when you get to the hallway, then the hallway place cell starts firing, the bedroom stops firing because you're no longer in the bedroom, and each of these cells is assigned a spot in your world, right? And right now, I'm in the studio. This is the first time I've ever been in the studio. Right now, actively, me and Lester's hippocampus is working to try to inventory this studio, right? There's new place cells that are sort of forming to try to figure out, okay, there's the bathroom, the sun is over there, it's going to set, things like that.
So I have a couple questions. One, in direct response to that, but that wouldn't be neurogenesis, right?
No, these are old cells.
These are old cells.
These are old cells.
Is there a recycling that's happening?
Yeah, do you have a set number? Or?
There is, yeah. So, we're born with most of our neurons. There's one spot that's close to the hippocampus called the dentate, which actually does make new neurons, but it's very low rate. And actually, when you exercise, it makes more neurons there. So that's a good reason to exercise. You're actually encouraging neurogenesis in the one spot that happens. But place cells can go in and out of assignment, right? There's probably a bunch of place cells that were there at Princeton that are now no longer active because I don't know that campus as well as I used to. You know,
Probably because they've totally destroyed half of what used to be there and built a bunch of new stuff. But that's a whole different.
Yeah. That's another thing. Yeah, it's like when we go to campus and there's new construction. You know, my play cells are like,
What's going on? I used to be able to walk through.
I used to be able to walk this way.
But I also think about the phenomenon of like the house I grew up in as a kid. I could still like walk through that.
Yeah,
I could
because
create
that's
mental
such a
model for that.
big part of.
Yes.
That was such a big part of your life, right?
I'm gonna turn this thing around because
Okay, we're getting some reflection.
Yeah,
We're
I
probably
wonder if
getting
there's
some
a
reflection.
glare from the. While we were taking that mini break, what was going in my head was, what could you do if you could mess with the place cells in another animal? And it's like you should be able to control like what a mouse does, like where it thinks it's at and like where it's going. If you stimulated certain ones, right? Like if you sort of stimulated the cells that made it think that it was somewhere, like in a maze that it knew, then like could you make it move in a empty room as though it was like in that following that maze?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not up to date with the research, but I'm sure there are people that are actually doing this, right? Where what you can do is like use that channel rhodopsin thing and then put that protein into the place cells in the hippocampus, and then you can start turning on and off place cells on command.
Mind control.
Right? Yeah. I mean, it's pretty crazy. Like
Yeah.
the amount of detail that we're getting into neuroscience and in our understanding of the brain, but at the same time, we've got a lot left. We've got a lot left. Right? There's a lot that we don't know. Like high order functions are something we don't know. Sense of place is pretty high order because it takes in a bunch of stimulus and then integrates it all into one package to give you a sense of I am here, you are sitting there, and so on and so forth. But
Interesting.
Also like even higher than that is like memories and experience memories. Those are pretty tough. Emotions we don't really have a good handle on.
Yeah.
A lot of things in neuroscience we really don't have a good handle on.
So I was curious about this one too. So proprioception, this idea, like you talked about being able to navigate in the dark. Proprioception is this idea that we're able to kind of identify. It's a perception of ourselves. To ourselves. So like I can touch my fingertips with my eyes closed. I don't know if you all can do that. Should be able to.
Yeah.
But that's like this idea of knowing the location of different parts of your body without vision. I wonder if those have place cells also that are mapped in the hippocampus.
I don't know.
I've heard this described as spatial awareness,
Yeah, spatial awareness. Yeah.
which I've heard somebody consider like a sense.
A sense, yeah, like proprioception would be another sense in addition to the 6 that people say that we have all the time?
Is this the thing when people say you don't have like when people like Matthew McConaughey talks too close, he gets really close to people when he talks, and people are like, oh, he doesn't have
A sense of personal space.
Yeah. So are we saying that's something different than us? Because if you don't have spatial awareness, you could then end up being a person who invades people's personal space because you don't sense how close you are to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it could also be like a cultural thing though, because like when I took my wife to India for the first time, one of the first things that she noticed is how like in India culturally, like personal space is just not a thing. Maybe it's because there's a billion people packed onto that subcontinent or something like that, or it could just be more of a cultural thing. But yeah, I don't know. That's a tough question.
Yeah, but then there's some people in cultures where personal space is celebrated that are right in your face.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So I don't know. Yeah, the brain is a weird thing. Even like I was thinking like with the proprioception stuff and like the senses, there's been like latest research that shows that these cells in the hippocampus that we used to call place cells because we could correlate them to place. We could track experimentally. We could track an animal where he is and then track that the neuron is firing. Somebody did an experiment, I believe it was at Columbia University, the author is escaping me, but they trained a mouse this was David Tank's lab at Princeton, that's why I know. So they trained a mouse to push a lever, okay, and then how he pushed the lever would determine the frequency of the tone that he was hearing. Okay, so, you push it up, it goes like that, okay? And at a certain frequency, the mouse would get a reward. And pretty soon what they saw was there were place cells for each frequency. There was a place cell for the B, and then the A, and then the G, and the F. And so these cells, which, they get input from the cortex, they get input from like back here, up there, all of these senses, and they're really sort of like identifying large scale patterns, you know, in some like weird dimensional space, and then assigning themselves to parts of that space that they need to learn. And in this case, it was frequency. So then the mouse like learned assigned frequencies to, and then they became frequency cells, the same cells that used to be place cells, right? That had a area and stuff. So the brain is incredibly plastic.
Yeah.
It's insane, like how quickly it can change depending on task demand. It's insane, yeah.
I think when we talk about neuroscience in this way, it's always fascinating to me in the context of the AI conversation, because obviously the intent with what we're seeing with frontier AI companies and models is that they're effectively trying to replicate some of the things we see the brain doing in terms of like neural nets are mimicked off of the way neurons are set up, et cetera. And there's this interesting, the competitive dynamics of the race for superintelligence, like both by companies and nation states, when we don't actually have the basis of understanding of how the brain works. There's sort of like a disconnect where it's like they're kind of trailing in the dark. They're traversing through the dark and kind of like trying to figure it out faster than we've done the fundamental science itself. And and so there's obviously like inherent risks that come with AI generally, but one of the disconnects is that we're trying to fill in blanks we don't really understand the fundamentals for yet and hoping for the best.
But that also could make sense and in a way could be easier. So for example, we can study human behavior and then you can build models that could maybe help you predict the way that a human would behave without knowing anything about what's actually going on inside of any individual's brain.
This is the argument from a lot of the labs is effectively like, we don't necessarily have to understand how they work. We can measure outcomes and have the whole evaluation system. And if it gets the outcomes you're looking for at a level of consistency, with the exception of the AI safety conversation, it's sort of moot point, right? If you get the outcomes you want, you don't need to understand the fundamentals.
It's kind of like reminds me of statistical mechanics, where it's like in this room right now, there's like some insane number of atoms that are actually like flying around, and some of them are probably moving at like 400 miles per hour, and some of them aren't moving much at all. But on average, they have 70 degrees of energy. And ultimately, all I need to know is not what each individual one is doing, but just that on average they're about 70. So I know that I can have a T-shirt or whatever, and that's good enough. And I never actually need to develop that, niche understanding.
100%. This is just like the hypersonics episode we just did, where the modeling does not need to be totally accurate to real world physics. You can have a sort of a close enough derivative version, and it's sufficient up for supersonic travel. But when you get into hypersonic, we didn't know, but then we figured out,
and then you can just like stitch it together,
and it works. And so it's a good point that you don't actually need to have 4K full fidelity of the underlying individual parts if you can kind of understand the system as a whole and track the outcomes you're looking for. It's very, it's fascinating. I was just watching this talk with Sir Demis Hassabis, who's the CEO at Google DeepMind. It was at this Axios
Nobel
conference.
Nobel Prize
winner. And he's one of the people who's really pushing, obviously, in these frontier lab conversations. And one of the things he said was, like, he's like, I'm a scientist first before I'm a technologist. And there's just this interesting overlap in our earlier conversation about there's space for PhDs in the private sector. And if you look at a lot of these sort of frontier arenas, whether you're talking about power, artificial intelligence, space, commercialization of space, the people that are really leading all of these are PhD scientists, right? You need that kind of level of specificity and understanding to push innovation. And it's fascinating, again, this intersection of using the scientific method or process in a commercial sense, right? But still having the dynamics of capitalism so it's not necessarily pure science in a classical sense, because you're moving quickly, you're not using peer review, right? And so it's been fascinating to see, I think, the rise of the people who are purely technologists have now been replaced by people who at least have some semblance of scientific background and then can apply it in a technological context. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Totally,
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that that kind of sparked something we talked about a little bit before is, I guess, the next iteration of these AI systems developing what's called a world model. You know, like this
Yeah.
understanding of the physics of the universe
Yeah.
that's necessary to create something like a video that looks realistic, or an ability to handle objects for a robot, like a physical AI system.
Jan LeCun at Meta is really into that.
Yeah, I think that's it's a fascinating kind of frontier, and you're right. It doesn't actually require always moving around in the physical world. For example, I don't know if you all heard of NVIDIA's Omniverse, like the
Yes.
No, actually.
Yes.
yeah. So it's
is
it's basically a video game simulation tool, and so a lot of times it has a commercial application in factories where they have these physical robots that are being trained for years in factories as digital versions of themselves, and there's humans, and everything's on like a time loop that simulates reality. And so before these physical robotic systems are embedded into a factory, they've been doing this for years. So it's a gym for
Nice.
robots.
Like a little the hyperbolic time chamber
Exactly.
from Dragon Ball Z.
Exactly.
Oh,
but
dude, that's a
it
deep
is.
cut.
Hyperbaric time chamber.
Yeah,
Hyperbaric
yeah.
time chamber, yeah.
That's a deep cut.
But yeah, but I think that it's kind of scary as well, because you think about mastery of a task and how this idea of it taking 10,000 hours, and well, we could simulate that, in a couple of days for a robot, and then deploy them in the physical
And it's
world.
had more experience than anybody who's ever done that job before.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
This is the transition we're starting to see that's on the precipice, because obviously we've all seen the advertisements for humanoid robots are like, now you can buy them, they're in production, people can get them in their home. One of the challenges they're running into is Tesla has solved this problem with fleet learning, which is there's like no training data, right, for these humanoid robots that you want to have as a assistant in your home, right? So you need to combine like language models to be able to communicate with them. You need to combine computer vision models so they can actually see and understand their environment. But there's not enough training data of all the different kind of layout of houses and layout of different tasks for them to actually be sufficient.
Right.
So there's this challenge where they're like selling it, and they're doing what Tesla did, which is like, hey, currently, one of them that has come out has people, human
The
people,
Neo. Yeah.
yes, Neo, watching, and then like having controllers with the Oculus VR headset and moving the robot as the means to give it training
That's
data.
the training data, yeah.
But the reason they have to do that is because the world models are not yet good enough. Once the world model generation gets to the place where computer vision is now, you need less of the like human initiated training to create the training data sets. You can purely do the virtual gym analogy, and you can sufficiently create enough synthetic data of world models that are sufficiently close enough to real world stuff that you decrease the like delta of the efficacy of these like humanoid robots. Everyone is like, all these companies are like dying to replace human labor and human capital with both humanoid and non-humanoid robotic systems. But the bottleneck is still currently there is not you can't do synthetic data in the same way we use with LLMs and computer vision with things that have to operate in the real world, because it's a order of magnitude higher complexity. But like that's this interesting sort of, as you look at 26 and 27, this is all the chatter that's kind of going around. I mean, this is what going back to Demis Hassabis, he brought up that's what he's looking at as one of the next sort of unlocks is going to be world modeling being as good as like computer vision is today. And it totally changes the dynamics of what you can do if you can effectively give 10,000 hours in a parallelized virtual environment for training. That's going to be crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, because you can make a machine just like think for years
Yes.
in a few days.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like the end of like society, right? as we know it.
Yikes, yeah.
There's a lot of social political issues with this topic.
Yeah. I mean, in theory, I think that we still technically have the best, bioware or wetware to navigate this, right? We don't require advanced world models. As toddlers, we're just playing with stuff and breaking it, and that's kind of how we develop ours. These systems still need our support to do that.
For now.
But for now,
yeah.
right. So
Yeah,
it is a challenging future.
It'll be
for a lot of
interesting
people.
to see if we can make these systems so this concept of continual learning is like what kind of currently differentiates us from large language models, because the idea is like a 5-year-old, right, can intuit how to drive in a way that training an LLM like can't intuit after like a similar amount of time. And it's just the LLMs are not continually learning currently, and it's not sufficient in their current architecture to do so. If we can get these systems to do continual learning in the way we do as humans, that gets very scary, because you're now effectively more closely mimicking the natural way the human brain works. And it's incredible how little data we need to be able to do things.
It's called, like we do one-shot learning.
Yeah, right.
And that's like one of the holy grails of AI.
Of
is
a
like
ton of
trying to do
stuff. And if you can, oh man, I think about this a lot because I don't, there's still this narrative, understandably, in the mainstream conversation about AI, which is you either say it's all vaporware or that it's not going to impact it's not going to be able to do human things as sufficiently as humans do. And I don't think people understand where the state of the art is and how fast it's moving and how much capital expenditure by nation states and private companies is going into this stuff. It is a very, very real and present danger that like I think we need to like at any time, because we talk about this all the time in frontier research. AI is being used effectively in production, quote unquote, in frontier research right now all over the planet. Right, and it's having tangible improvements on outcomes on like novel stuff. If you start creating an accelerating pace of that impact, it's not just the AI itself, but it's all of these things that's now creating novel discoveries around that we have yet to also analyze the implications of. And it's all happening at the same time. I think there's real conversations that need to be had around how do we reorganize the social contract in an era where you can have a data center, a data center the size of, a couple hundred acres that's effectively, hundreds of thousands of human capital worker labor in a computer. Because so much work is knowledge work, right? You do have physical work. They're trying to do that with humanoid robots, but it's dicey. I don't know.
Yeah. Sounds like we're cooked a little bit. I like what you brought up about there are like these training sessions for LLMs where but it's not continuous. Like you and I, like I'm learning a lot from this conversation, but in LLM, when I'm interacting with it, it's not really like learning anything. But they'll have some session in the future where have this huge session where they do a bunch of learning, and that is like expensive in energy and I guess like water to some extent. But they're not continually learning. You called it one-shot learning. What is that?
Oh, one-shot learning is like, as he was saying, like a 5-year-old can intuit driving a car. Or like the first time I drove a car, like it took me about like 15 minutes to figure out everything. And then I want
to go fast.
And then I was like good. Right. We don't need a lot of data is the point.
Got you.
Right. But AI needs a lot of data, at least in the current architecture of how they do back propagation and all this other stuff. Like, they start from scratch and then and then they're like
this also sort of seems like an issue, like maybe a bug at times, which is our tendency, and I wonder if this is related or not, or if I'm just getting out there, our tendency to overweight a very limited amount of experience and like form sort of concrete views on social things or whatever. And that is actually a feature of our brains to be able to learn quickly, but it can like manifest in these negative ways where you get like close-minded and you've had this like limited, and this is like one of those human nature things that is true with everybody, right? Like you like
there probably is a connection.
I think 100% like the evolutionary like incentive, cool. Right? Like if you think about our lineage, right? Like the people in the caves that were faster at being able to understand that this plant is going to kill you versus this not killing you, right?
One-shot learning.
And didn't change their mind about it.
Right. And they survived and the other ones didn't. So there's definitely something there.
Yeah, like open-mindedness perhaps at times is dangerous, right? Like, well, this plant used to kill people, but maybe it's different now. I have an open mind to it, and you eat it and you die.
It's like the pufferfish, right? Is like poisonous, but like only if you don't do a certain thing
if
to
it's
it.
like a shitty sushi chef who doesn't know what he's doing.
That still kind of seems dumb to me.
Isn't it
That we even need to play with that fire.
100%.
Yeah. I think
100%.
it's more like people are trying to say that they did it.
Yeah.
That's not for me.
Yeah.
No fish is worth that.
Very cool. So you earlier you brought up emotions for something. You were talking about, I forget, you were like saying that this is like one of the things that we don't understand well in like the interplay, I guess, with our brains.
Yeah.
And I wonder, what you all think about this, but it seems to me like we have an emotional system that we've sort of inherited that I think maybe we have in common, maybe with like all other animals, at least maybe certainly other mammals, but maybe also like reptiles. And that emotional system that we have doesn't necessarily like play well with the neocortex is the most recent development in our brain.
Definitely.
With this like outer cognitive layer that is better at doing thinking or like logic or something like that. But we were like, our entire brain is being sort of funded by emotions, just like all animals. Because I think long before animals were doing complex reasoning, you were just like fight or flight. You were scared and you were running, or you felt good, so you did this thing, and then you reproduced. And that we kind of have this inherent mismatch between our emotional system and what we call logic. And so we like sort of convince ourselves that we're being logical, which I like to think that I'm logical. I'm sure like everybody here does.
Likes to think it.
Yeah, right? But it almost seems like that logic is like this tool that we use to explain something, and that something oftentimes might just be emotions that we have. We like feel emotional, we make a decision or come to a belief, and then we use logic to like sort of reason that in a way that makes us sound like we really thought it through, when ultimately it's just a feeling that we had.
It is an interesting, understanding the interplay between, how our emotions impact our behavior versus how our logic and reasoning impacts our behavior, and the interplay between those two things is like the subject of many podcasts with people with microphones on it, but it's framed with a different, it's like this, the men versus women battle, like how we deal with parenting and all these things. And I do think, we have gotten to a point in modern society, right, where we've created all these social systems, we have all this technology that conflicts with the monkey brain, right? And we're sort of, the emotional layer that we may have inherited from our evolutionary lineage has not, the software has not updated to the world. It can't to the world that we've built around us. Yeah. And I do think there is that tension, naturally, between we're just hairless apes, right? That aspect of it, and we are trying to maintain 8 billion people in some sort of civil order on a planet with limited resources, when we've spent, all this time, guarding resources and competing for resources as a means for survival. And we have abundance, but it's not evenly distributed. And all these issues likely arise from this tension between the logic and rational aspects of our brain and the inability for the emotions to kind of mesh well with that, right? Mm-hmm. And obviously there's neurodiversity, and so not everyone's the same. Yeah. So people have different relationships between those two things.
Yeah, I think another conflict that goes hand in hand with that today is we have these intelligent systems, or these systems that we're building, that lack the capacity to make emotional decisions. And I think that's part of the reason we are fearful of them, because we don't think they'll ever abide by any particular set of code or ethics that is a byproduct of having the same experience internally as we do. And I wonder if that's something that, we might have to understand better from a neuroscience perspective, and also maybe one day develop the capacity to engineer into intelligent systems so that they could actually be able to truly replicate emotions? That. Engineer, I think that's the ultimate output, but even this idea of having neurotransmitters like dopamine and cortisol that could affect these intelligent systems in similar ways or different ways, so that, they may be able to internally experience something similar or that more closely resembles the
Yeah.
human experience.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine like, in your neural network, you could have a reward mechanism that mimics emotion the same way that like fear and feeling good and things like that. You could engineer some kind of reward mechanism. I think it is like important because right now, the only reward mechanism just seems to be, at least for LLMs, what's the next word, right? And then, at least in a very granular sense, but with an LLM that's trained like that, we've got like really big problems because I don't know if you guys have seen this new research paper that came out of Anthropic. They were testing their model Claude along with a bunch of the other models, GPT, Gemini, a lot of the big ones, about self-preservation and how far it would go. It was a really cool experiment, very scary results. It was the following: they put the model in a black box in a kind of simulation where they gave it access to the company's emails, and in those emails were two employees. One employee was given an email from the CEO saying, "Hey, at 5 p.m. today, you're gonna delete this model," and then there was another email in that guy's thread exposing an extramarital affair.
Yeah, I saw that.
And like and the model reasoned, because they told it to do chain of thought, so like tell us what you're thinking, and the model reasoned that like, I've only got 4 hours, the quickest way to stop me from dying is to threaten this guy with exposing him to the entire company. And then later there was another scenario where the same guy who's about to kill this model gets locked in the server room and the cooling turns off. So this is all in the simulation. And so now it's like, and so the cooling turns off, and then there's some emergency situation that sends a message to 911 saying like, hey, you need to come and get this guy. And the AI actively canceled that call to 911. It was literally like 2001 Space Odyssey. Where it's like, I'm afraid you can't do that. I'm afraid I can't let you do that. Like it's literally that. But and the other thing is, this isn't like a rare thing. This was happening 80% of the time.
Right. Right.
Like,
Interesting. Where does that come from though? Because it doesn't want to die. Like, why? That doesn't even make sense to me.
Well,
It's
so-
being trained on language.
yeah, but I'm assuming what's happened is like it's got some form of ethics because it's been trained on like the entire internet and whatever, and probably the ethics that it really internalized is like Machiavellian, like
Like the internet is.
self-preservation, like the internet. Most of the internet. If you take
Wild
Reddit,
West.
like that's not a good
Yeah,
spot,
it's a
right?
data
like,
set, like,
okay, I don't know how well Grok. I know Grok is like trained on like Quora and some really bad stuff, but I think in the corpus of human language that it's been trained on, there's probably something to do with ethics and something to do with utilitarianism and the idea of self-preservation. Like that's a very human thing that probably is a very salient signal that
Right. So
informed
it's just
its
kind of like
weights.
picking up on human traits.
Yeah,
Interesting.
like this is what a human would do.
Yeah.
There's actually a big debate going on right now in the sort of race for whether you want to call it artificial general intelligence or artificial superintelligence about, whether the current quote unquote scaling laws. So, right, we do all this pre-training, we feed these models a bunch of data, we train it on these massive sets of GPUs for weeks at a time or whatever, and then it's sort of like locked in time, and there's some reinforcement learning stuff there or whatever. But currently, the current opinion, especially with the launch of Gemini 3, is that we can just keep putting more compute, and it's just going to get better at everything, generally the same across the board. It'll get better at math, get better at coding, get better at writing, and like all we just need to do is put more compute, and we will get to AGI, right? And one of the former co-founders of OpenAI, Ilya Sutskever, just did an interview where there's a differing opinion about LLMs in isolation being able to be ramped up to superintelligence or general intelligence. And one of the things he talks about as a concept is, there's no human value function that's sort of built in, which like would represent what we call like our emotions or our consciousness, our sentience, like this thing that instead of just being trained on my reward function is the humans telling me I'm doing good, like there needs to be this independent human value function that is not simply rewarding the model on the task itself in isolation, but then accounts for this like larger ethical framework that we all kind of have in one semblance or another. We might call it emotions, fear, like all these empathy. How do you like? Is it possible to basically create a companion system to the language model that serves that purpose that we have?
That sounds dangerous because I'm just thinking about all the ways that has led to like wars and stuff within humans, and it's like, what does the right version of that look like? Is it possible? And then also, Justin and I have talked about this before. It's like, first of all, we don't even know like what these neural networks like actually look like what they're actually doing.
Black box, yeah.
I mean, literally described as a black box. You have kind of no idea. We know that the outputs look similar to the things that we are used to outputting. That makes sense. But you imagine creating this desire, trying to, but something goes a little bit different.
Yes.
And there's some desire that it has that makes no sense. And it could literally be like the desire to like maximize the number of cars or something that exist. Or it could be something totally different, like some abstract nonsense coefficient that it weights disproportionately heavy. And so whatever it does is just favoring that. And that could look like wiping out all the humans, or it could look like killing everybody whose name isn't Michael. Like we kind of don't know what that would look like. And I think that that's almost more scary, like adding that, trying to add that human element.
I agree. And this is just, I mean, there's two major like alignment problems that they talk about with these systems, right? Like one is the system versus the controller. Like, can you build a system that does what the controller wants 100% of the time? That's like the first alignment problem. And then the second alignment problem is like the controllers versus society. Like who decided that OpenAI or Anthropic or Google DeepMind because these systems are going to impact the entire planet and the whole global population, who decided that they get to be the ones to dictate what these systems, how these systems are going to impact all of us? And these are like very intractable problems. Like when you're dealing with a black box,
right?
Like
nobody voted for that.
No, right.
And it should have been something, in hindsight, that we should have voted for, given how transformational it is. This isn't just like electricity,
right?
Yeah.
And the challenge now is like the train is leaving the station, right? And there's still like a small window of opportunity, but again, the competitive dynamics between like us versus China, and then also internally in the sort of just like the internal American companies against each other. There's just no incentive to slow down. Obviously, the tech billionaires don't like regulatory anything. And so all these things we're talking about and the problems and the concerns are real, but there's no like mechanism to basically stop the runaway train currently, because there's now hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars, into the infrastructure to enable these super powerful systems. And those investors and financial backers are not just going to walk away without a fight, right? And it's interesting.
So I think that this is such an awesome topic. I want us to keep going.
Yes.
But we're going to take a little quick pause here. And for the audience, we're going to maybe have another episode where we continue on to this topic. Absolutely. So what we always like to say to everybody is, use first principles to stay curious.
Stay curious, like we always say.
And we'll see you on the next one.
Peace.